First, Robert Bruce. Then Linda interviews the angel light inventor. That's right, the guy who's claiming he's invented something that can see through walls. The French government allegedly has paid him a lot of money for it. A lot of scientists are fascinating, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Is it a hoax or is it for real? Well, he says he invented it because of a dream. Listen to him tell his story and make up your own mind. I am proud, but frankly a little frightened, to introduce Robert Bruce, his new book, a masterpiece, Mastering Astral Projection, Successful Astral Projection in 90 Days. Well, we're going to get into that in a few minutes, but before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about the last couple of times Robert was on this radio program. All hell broke loose in my life. We talked about his book about psychic self-defense. That book, Robert, what was that called? Mastering Psychic Self-Defense? I forget the title of it.
Practical Psychic Self-Defense.
That's right, Practical Psychic Self-Defense. And it was a perfectly fascinating program, and it was very popular with listeners. But afterwards, I proceeded to experience a psychic attack of no small proportions. In fact, it was the most bizarre thing I can remember having happened to me in a long time, and I've had a few things happen to me in my life that were bizarre. Specifically, it involved something that kept coming up my leg physically, and which I eventually captured one night as it was boring into my skin above my collarbone, pulled it out of myself, and could see it between my fingers. But when I opened my fingers after crushing it, it just disappeared before my eyes. And you recommended, as I recall, that I plunge it into a dish of salt on the bedside. And that helped. It made it smaller. But it didn't go away for a long, long time, Robert. And before we go on, I want to say two things about Robert Bruce. First, he's the real deal, in my opinion. And second, he is a master of something. What that is, I don't know. Robert, maybe you can enlighten us. What happened to me, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I think is was happening to you, and we've talked about this at some length. Some of the experiences you were having with the little entity thing crawling up your leg, I've had that myself in the past as well, and I think this is happening to your astral body. And what you're looking at here is like an astral creature of some kind. It doesn't physically exist, but it is in the astral. And you seem to have the tendency to wake up in your astral body, and often you do not know you are awake in your astral body. It appears to be your physical body. So in that particular state where you are awake in your astral body and you have like an astral creature interfering with you, it appears for all the world like it is a physical event happening. And the idea of plunging it into salt is a crystalline, absorbent crystal form. And if you plunge an astral creature into salt, it will absorb the energy out of it and demanifest it. And you may have to do that repeated times, but it will have an effect. Go ahead. This is just one of the countermeasures you can use for that sort of thing. And since we spoke last, I've been working on more countermeasures and trying to find more effective ways of solving these sorts of problems, which are really difficult to come to grips with.
Now, do you still have this sort of thing happening to you?
Occasionally, they come and go. Given the sort of work I do a lot of healing, occasionally exorcisms, and I tend to come across negative entities quite frequently, and occasionally you will pick them up in your travels.
Now,
but
of course, by travels, Robert Bruce is not talking about travels on any airplanes. Am I right about that?
Well, a bit of both. I do quite a lot of astral projection, as well as the workshops I've been doing around the world lately, the last 2 years. But you can pick these things up in the astral occasionally, although it's more likely you would pick them up in the physical body when you are, helping people with these sorts of problems.
Now, why?
But I've become quite adept at cleansing myself.
What are they, Robert? I mean, is the
really
astral plane ridden with bugs and little unpleasant little creatures crawling around?
To an extent, yeah. The best way you can explain this is as above, so below. The astral dimension is a massive dimensional area closely linked to the physical, and for everything there is in the physical world, including bugs, snakes, spiders, lions, tigers, you name it, there is something like that in the astral.
Well, I woke up one night. I have, it's true, had a few astral experiences, I guess. I woke up one night. This was after I'd spent quite a bit of time, weeks in fact, with this group of people who would meditate with me in the night, and they would come and you'd hear them, 7 of them, landing on the roof just after I started meditating, right above the room that I would meditate in, and they were coming every night, and one of them would come down into the house sometimes, and in fact spent some time actually living in the house. And one night, when we first met, when they first showed up, a couple of nights after the first time I encountered them, one of them, they began to want to see a review of my life. And they came across something in my life that could, I think, justifiably have been called a sin. I mean, I'm not a saint. I've done things that are wrong. And they were really rather nonplussed by this. Later that night, I woke up, and the roof seemed to be gone, and all 7 of them were glaring down at me from above, and behind them the sky was absolutely black and featureless without a single star in it. It was an awful darkness. Awful. And then, the next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes again, and the roof was back, but this time there were 4 enormous spiders hanging above our bed. Really huge, with great black abdomens with stripes on them like tiger stripes. This was not amusing, to say the least, because they looked like they were not stable. They looked like they were about to fall. And I was faced with a desire to get up and run away, or to turn around and go and get my wife out from under them, because she was asleep, peacefully asleep there too. I jumped out of the bed, and I made a decision at that moment. I would not run away. I would get Anne. And as soon as I made that decision, they disappeared. Now, this was an astral experience of some kind. It had to do, and I don't want to go into the personal part of it, but it had to do with deeply personal things about me. Now, I bring it up because, and I talk about it at length, because I think it's something that will make a lot of sense to you, and that you will be able to describe this world in which I found myself and something of its meaning, because I think it's a place you're very familiar with. Is that true?
Yes. Yes.
Well, okay. Then tell us what was happening here.
Right. The first part here is there could be a psychological content if you have unresolved issues in the past, guilt, trauma, various things like that can cause what I call core images, which are shadowy areas in your psyche, in your being, which can exist anywhere in your body. And if you have something like this, these are the primary areas, core images, where negative entities will attach to, and in a way hide in. A core image creates like a shadow in your in your being, and they exist in them and are attracted by these shadows. So a part of the process of removing these core images and taking yourself out of the reach of astral entities is to through resolving traumas and issues psychologically or with other methods, like I've given my book Practical Psychic Self-Defense with the core image removal work. But the experience you give there, in part, the first part appears to be some kind of astral initiation, where you are being examined by, you could say, advanced beings. And the second part, where the ceiling disappeared and then you saw these giant astral spiders. Why did it have to be spiders? Astral spiders and snakes are so common.
Well, I think it's because they wanted to scare you. It was effective. It worked.
Oh, yes, very much so. I mean, if a being is trying to telepathically implant something in your mind to scare you, spiders, snakes, things like that are, naturally scary things. But they also, they could be astral spiders, actually astral beings, which may not actually be like spiders, but you could say in your mind's eye, when you see them with astral sight in the astral, the energy of these beings, which they could be just little blobs like jellyfish, when your mind perceives them, it translates that energy into an image of a spider. And spiders are things which build webs and bite and suck, energy out of, or blood out of things. So
now you said little. Wait a minute, Robert. Just a second. You said little blobs like jellyfish, and that has a particularly interesting resonance for me. I want to ask you. I've got a burning question to ask about that, and I'm going to do that in just a minute. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We'll be right back. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We're back talking to Robert Bruce, The Real Deal, his book Mastering Astral Projection. It will work because this man does know what he's talking about. He wouldn't be on this program if he didn't. I know he knows what he's talking about because I've had experiences in the astral because of him. And extraordinary experiences. And he's really one of the only people I've ever connected with in quite this way, and I think you're going to connect with it too. You can do this. It's very doable. It's possible to have a life that is bigger than a physical life. This other world that he's talking about is very, very real. It's huge. It's complex. It's right here, and you're part of it. You can notice your place in it with Robert's work. Successful astral projection. You can do it. You can do it. If you take the time, this book, it's extremely well worked out in this thing. You can use this, not gobbledygook. It's not abstruse. It's got a great CD with it, all kinds of things. Now, Robert, before we left the air, I asked, you had mentioned that sometimes these astral beings may just be like a little blob of something. Okay, let me tell you another story. I was lying in bed and reading. My wife was reading beside me. And suddenly this entity came racing across the room toward me. It was a blob, just like you described, but moving very quickly. And I grabbed the table beside the bed and hurled the table at it with all of my might, shattered the table. My wife threw her book up in the air, screamed bloody murder, and the thing disappeared. Now, that's not the end of the story. The next day, my brother telephoned me and said to me, something bizarre has happened, Whitley. I was playing my guitar in bed and suddenly saw this strange entity at the foot of the bed. I threw my guitar at it, and this morning when I woke up, I found in the top window of the window frame a neatly round hole cut with 3 shards of glass taken out of it and the glass put to one side. And I have a feeling this has something to do with you, because I feel a message, and the message was that if you're not careful, somebody could get hurt. And I don't know anything about what this means. Incredibly, a few hours later, a friend of mine telephoned who had been away from his house, had come home, and had opened his locked apartment, and there lying on the floor in the doorway were 3 shards of glass. And he called me and said, I think I'm calling you, and I don't know why, except I think they have something to do with you. Now, this is an astral experience of some kind for all 3 of us. How do you react to it? What was this little blob of entity that caused so much brouhaha in our lives, and why?
That's bizarre.
Isn't it wonderful?
I really don't know what. Yeah, especially the physical evidence. It's
Oh, I know it.
I really don't know what the entity is.
The astral and the physical were coming together as one world at that point, I think.
Yeah, there are crossovers, and I mean, certain beings do seem to have the ability to shift from one dimension to the other, and that includes extraterrestrials and some astral beings. So I've long had a theory that a lot of extraterrestrials use the astral dimension for like a kind of hyperspace to travel through undetected, but also to study us. You know, if you have a powerful, controlled astral projection, it's the perfect means by which to study anything, because you're invisible.
Now, your book Go ahead.
Yes, what the entity is, I really don't know. It's it's a hard one to work out. But the fact that it affected 3 different places, your brother and that other person there, is amazing.
So so it is amazing. Now let me ask you this: when you travel astrally, where do you go? What's it like? Various places. The majority of astral projections I do today are devoted to healing and helping people. I have a long to-do list with people who need help in various ways. Some of them have entity problems, some of them have health problems, and I do a lot of healing in the astral. It's a very powerful medium by which to do that. And I do a little bit of exploring occasionally, but mainly healing, and is what I do now. When you go
I plan to get back to
go ahead.
Exploring another time.
Now, when you go into the astral to heal somebody, what's it like? Describe the experience.
The experience it's very real, but it also has a surreal quality. Gravity is different, the light is different, and if you are in real time, what I call the real time zone, there's a very close resemblance to the physical dimension. But as you drift away from that, it changes and bears no relationship to the physical universe. For example, if I go and visit somebody in the astral, I will, if I don't know exactly where they are, I will ask to be taken to them, and my higher self aspect of myself will grab me and transport me to that person. And around that person, I will see not only their physical surroundings, but also metaphorically around them, I will see images and items which will give me an indication as to their condition and the causes behind it. And if there are any entities involved, they will usually be, manifesting there as well. Which
Now,
so it's very good to investigate.
So you're saying that there is an astral aspect to physical illness. Is that what you're talking about, or you're talking about purely astral illnesses?
That very often, I find there is very often, like all the time. There, I don't know what the percentage would be, but very, very high. If there is a condition in the astral body or the physical or the energy body which underlies the physical, there is it will affect the physical body, and it will often cause various illnesses, diseases, and things to manifest in the physical body. So one part of the approach of healing and work in the astral is to remove these disease conditions from the astral and the energy body, and then heal the astral and energy body. So, and once that is healed, the physical body will follow suit and heal itself.
How interesting. And now, why do these things happen in the astral?
The astral is, a fascinating area. As to the whys of these things, there are hundreds of different explanations and reasons why. There are various, you could call them entities out there, which are like predators, like the spiders you mentioned earlier, and they are. What they do is a very natural thing, and I think it is a part of the natural selection process that some of these entities are attracted to certain conditions, and when they find these conditions in a human being, particular types of core images and lifestyle conditions, weaknesses in the energy body, this attracts them, and they feed upon that person, or you could say attach to them, and this can cause diseases and even fatal diseases. And the spiders you saw before, I wanted to mention, talking about the crossover you mentioned, there is often a crossover between waking and sleeping, which can last for various amounts of time, a couple of minutes sometimes, where you, for example, wake up and physically get out of bed, but you are seeing the physical world around you, but you're also seeing into the astral. Now, at the time you mentioned you got out of bed and you saw these big spiders, that would have been one of the crossover events there. It's like a type of clairvoyance where you are physically awake, but your brow center, your third eye, is very active, and you are seeing into the astral dimension as well. Now, if you are more aware in that particular state, in the astral dimension, it is very, very fluid, and it's affected by your mind. So it is possible to build things with your mind. You can build shields, weapons, various things, and they are quite effective with dealing with astral entities. For example, you could have, created a suit of armor and a sword and attacked them, or take a more modern approach and create an RPG or a flamethrower and burn them. And if you put enough of your essence into that and effort into the creation of these things, they are quite effective at repelling and removing astral entities.
So it's possible to have an actual presence in this level of reality, but most people don't. So are these entities entirely free to do pretty much whatever they want to people? What do we look like to them? What do we look like to them? Or do you know?
I think we look like lunch.
Like lunch, that's what I think. Exactly what we look like.
Yeah. Food is the universal, food energy is the universal, a universal thing. And I don't think these things are evil. They may look evil, but I mean, a spider is not evil. A spider is just a spider
eating a fly.
Yeah, I mean, a spider is just having its normal lunch.
Right.
Like you would go into McDonald's and have a hamburger. Yeah.
That's exactly right. It's no big deal. Let me ask you about another type
of...
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
No, please.
Yes, very little is known about these things, but we are learning more all the time.
And we're going to learn more in just a minute, but with Robert Bruce, as we go deeper into the art of mastering astral projection, his really very cool new book. This is Whitley Strieber. It is Dreamland, and we'll be right back. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We're back with Robert Bruce, Mastering Astral Projection. Robert, have you got a website?
Yes, I do. It is www.astraldynamics.com. Same title as my first book.
Right, astraldynamics.com. And what got you into this? Why would you even write a book like Astral Dynamics? What made you start traveling, Robert?
Well, I've traveled my entire life since I got the earliest memories I have. I think it was about 4 or 5 years of age when I would be flying around the house, and I've done a lot of this as I was growing up. And once I started getting involved with the internet and writing and helping people, it was just natural to write about that, and because I knew a lot about it because I'd done it. And if I had any questions about, people would ask me a lot of questions on the internet many years ago, and I would simply sit down, have an astral projection, and explore that question, and or test something out, and come back with the answer. And then, because I was actually doing these things were, provable, repeatable sort of things, which other projectors would also go and emulate and find they were accurate. So eventually, coming down to now, I wrote Mastering Astral Projection with my co-author, Brian Mercer, who was a wonderful help. And he provided a huge amount of enthusiasm and organizational skill and input, being a keen projector himself. And, it was a winning combination. And now I'll move on to the next one. I've just sold another book called Foundations of Energy Work, which will be about a year's work.
You just started it?
And I think I've lost... Pardon?
You just started it?
Yes, I've started it and sold. I've sold the book. I'm waiting for a contract now.
Ah, I see.
So I'm hoping that should come out in about a year's time, hopefully.
I see. Incidentally, folks, there's a little bit of a lag in terms of our conversation. You might notice that there are pauses because Robert is in Australia and I'm here in California, and there's quite a bit of distance between us. It's winter here, summer there, night here, day there. So there's a bit of lag, and so excuse that if it sounds a little bit interrupted. In any case. Let's get back to the conversation, and in your book, you lay this out so well that I am tempted to believe that I could get proficient at this going through the book. Now, I say that advisedly because I've done a lot of this, most of it just naturally. In other words, these events that have happened to me have just happened. I did some very intentionally at the Monroe Institute. I took a gateway from Bob Monroe while he was alive, and it was a very, very extraordinary. I've had an out of one incredibly clear out of body experience where my full consciousness left my body, and I literally saw it lying there on the bed. I was outside of it completely, and I moved out and through the wall of the cabin and into the outside, and I got nervous because I thought, I just would be the type of person who would monkey around with this and actually die and end up. I wondered if I get out of here too far, maybe I'll be in trouble. So I sort of went over to a tree that was nearby, and I saw that the tree was covered with a film that you didn't normally see, a sort of silvery film that I could touch in the astral and kind of pull off of it. It was like an energy, and it was it didn't adhere to anything, but it was like over all of the living creatures all around me. Then I went back into the house, into my bedroom, and tried to get back into my body, and it was like mercury inside my body. It was very slick, and I kept falling out of it. And I thought, oh, great, I have actually killed myself with out-of-body travel. and now my poor wife's going to work her way up in the morning with this idiotic corpse beside her. And and then suddenly I saw my father mowing the lawn as he had been wont to do when I was a child. And he looked over his shoulder and said, "When are you going to come help me?" that got me back into my body toot sweet. Now, what was I seeing when I was out and seeing all of this change in the physical?
Right. Excuse me. First thing is, you are a natural projector. You have natural ability. And that's quite obvious because of all the spontaneous experiences you've had. But what you experienced there at the start was a real-time projection in the real world. And the real-time zone I define as being an accurate, direct reflection of reality as reality happens. It's not really the physical dimension, but it is like an exact copy. And what I think the shimmering field, how you described it, that sticky stuff you found around the trees that you peeled off, is probably like the life force of the trees, the life force which is around all living things. But getting back to your physical body, now, when you have an astral projection, spontaneous or induced, you project a copy of yourself out of body. You don't actually leave your physical body. It is not left an empty shell. If by some feat of the imagination the astral body fades away or was destroyed or something during an astral projection, you would still wake up the next morning, maybe with a bit of a headache and a little bit weak, but you may have lost a little bit of life force, but your original copy of mind and memory and spirit would still be there. Now, here is a little problem. When you have an astral projection, there is something which I've termed the mind split effect occurs, and your projected double exits your physical body and is then recording experience memories independently in energy form. Your physical body can still be awake at that time and possibly usually paralyzed, and will also be recording experience memories independently. Now, your dream mind can also be active at the same time, which means you can have 3 different memory sets for the same time, all trying to download into the same wrinkle in the brain, which causes a lot of problems, the memory download. Now, but very quickly to the point of the reason why you could not get back into your physical body is when you first fall asleep and have an astral projection, you're in a very light state of asleep, which is required for an astral projection, either a tranced or altered state, or which is very much like the sleep state. Now, when you try and get back in, if the physical body and mind has fallen into a deeper level of sleep, the projected double will not be able to wake it up when it comes back, and now it must wake it up slightly in order to be able to reintegrate. The sleep state is required for the projected double to be generated, but the physical body's got to be awakening or partly awake for it to be able to reintegrate. So if you fall into a deeper level of sleep, the astral body is effectively locked out for the duration until the physical body actually wakes up. Now, the other aspect, you said you saw your father mowing the lawn, was most probably from the dream mind, and that seems to have got your attention and woken you up, and which then allowed reintegration to occur instantly, and also allowed you to retain the memory. And parts of it you'll see here. You've got a part dream memory of your father mowing the lawn, part real-time projection, all mixed up into one experience, which is the norm. That's what normally happens.
So in other words, I must have chosen something from my memory that would be sure to wake me up, and it was a good choice in that sense, because the last thing I would want to do would be to die and find myself hanging out with my father still mowing the lawn.
Yeah, I think you were called then to do something. Your father called you to come and help you, and that seems to have triggered you to wake up,
right? Which
allowed you to remember the experience.
Well, I've often thought that he might have been having a pretty hot time in the afterlife. He had Dad was a politician at a time in Texas when it was hard to do that, not do some things you might later regret. Let me put it that way, without going into any detail. So possibly, I've always thought maybe the old man has had difficult time in the afterlife. What happens to people who do things that are wrong? Robert, do you ever see any of the consequences of that? What happens to our souls? Do you know?
Yes, I have a fair idea, Whitley. I've been to a number of the heavenly realms, you might call them.
Damn it, listening to you say it, I believe you have. Go ahead.
Yes, I have. I give some of the experiences in my books and some of the visits I've made to areas like that. And there's a lot of, quite a number of stories I give on my website. There's a huge amount of material there on astraldynamics.com. Stories like this where I've visited afterlife areas. And what it comes to me is that everybody that dies, it's not the same for everybody. The afterlife experience varies a lot depending upon who you are and what sort of baggage you take with you when you pass over, and depending on your state of mind. If you take a lot of emotional baggage with you, you may spend quite a long time processing your life and understanding your life until you get to a state where you realize the meaning of your life and understand it, and then progress on to another level, or reincarnate, if that is seems to be possible. But yeah, it's not the same for everybody. And like a suicide, for example, a person that dies a very, very troubled life does not fare any differently to a person who dies of natural causes that has had a very troubled life. There seems to be no particular laws there that penalise people for anything. It's just a matter of what you take with you. I mean, if you're a good person and you die a balanced, happy person, I mean, the afterlife process is very different. It's you don't have a lot of processing to do, and you go on to one of the heavenly realms and progress from there. Whereas a lot of people, if they are troubled, they will often spend time in I call them astral recovery areas, and in these areas people work through the aspects of their life that trouble them. For example, I visited a friend of mine a number of times who died many years ago, who was an alcoholic, and in the area I visited him for many, many years. He is in this little room in like a hospital, and in the room he is floating in a big bathtub full of beer. And he is perpetually drunk, and and is having a very difficult time processing his life and understanding things. And
can you help him?
And his deceased mother.
Can you help him?
I've been there and I've tried. I've been there and I've tried to help him and talk to him, and you can get moments of lucidity out of him. And his deceased mother and father are there with him often, as well as other members of his family. And also spirit people, I don't know who they are, that appear to be like doctors and even nurses.
Boy, it's fascinating, because I have to tell you, I've seen similar things. And when we get back, I'm going to ask Robert about these worlds and these spiritual doctors and nurses and the baggage we carry with us. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We'll be right back. This is Whitley Strieber. It's Dreamland. We're talking with Robert Bruce, a wonderful book, Mastering Astral Projection, 90-Day Guide to Out-of-Body Experience. And we're talking mostly about the worlds we live in. These are very real worlds. Make no mistake, they are worlds you know well, and that you have a right to participate in, an absolutely inalienable right that you've walked away from. So turn around and come on back and get in this thing. This is wonderful stuff. It will make you happier and better, much more of a human being, if you can walk in these realms with the same ease that Robert does, and he does walk in them with ease. Now, Robert, my wife recently had a dreadful illness, and during that which time she had a near-death experience, and she saw the world of the dead, or rather the edges of it, with a great number of people around, all of them, interestingly enough, carrying baggage, except her. What about the people who go into the world of the dead with no baggage? What does that mean?
depends on what you define the world of the dead. There is an astral area which you could relate to something like purgatory, where you've got a lot of unhappy spirits wandering around, moaning and reliving little parts of their lives. It's a shadowy, dismal type of realm. But these are not real spirits. In my opinion, they are like echoes of the past. Imagine through the act of living a life, you create like an astral echo of yourself, and after your physical body dies and you pass over into a higher level of the astral, you leave behind this continuing echo, which can take sometimes hundreds of years to dissolve. And that's one aspect of the afterlife. And that area particularly, if you go below ground during an astral projection in, say, a cemetery, you will often find large collections of afterlife-type dead people they're not real people. They don't have a real consciousness to them. You couldn't have a conversation with them because they're not really there. You go into the higher levels of the astral and you'll find them in various parts. It's not like a particular place you can go to. They're difficult to find. They're these insubstantial realms. You have to sort of tune into them, and to tune into something like that, you have to have some kind of attachment to it. You're either led there, you may be led to one of these areas by trying to tune into a deceased friend or loved one, and I hope to visit them in that way. But it's hugely complex, Whitley. It is not a simple thing. It is not like, a person dies and then they go here and there, and it's all the same for everybody. It's quite variable. Some people pass over who are more evolved spiritually and psychologically, and you find they pass over very, very smoothly into usually the higher and more sophisticated realms of the astral.
Tell us
dimension.
about these higher and more sophisticated realms.
Again, they're hugely varied, and I don't pretend to understand even 1% of them. But one thing I do know, you broached it before, these higher beings like the doctors and nurses and that you mentioned there, even these spirit guides that some people appear to have. I think these evolved beings are spirits who have gone beyond the reincarnational wheel and evolved to a certain point where they no longer have to reincarnate. And at that particular time, they have a choice then. They can either progress on a new path of evolution, which you could call the path of the masters, or, as most seem to do, they turn back and help humanity in whatever way they can. And then they become active in the spirit world, helping people and humanity. And these are often taken as, and will often take the part as being a spirit guide for somebody or groups of people.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. So where are we now? Let me ask you this. Rather than ask you, I want to change the subject. I want to go back to the book a little bit. One of the things that's you suggest, and completely a lot of different changes in lifestyle and so forth, and you talk a great deal in the book about relaxing, and we're not attuned, Robert, to this level of reality at all. We're not attuned. We seem to be in a world in which everything works against our even noticing it. We're worrying about the next car and the computer and this and that and the other thing. And you're saying basically you can tune out of all of that. You even mentioned a book about living thrifty. Tell us a little bit about this whole approach to life and why it makes you more attuned to the astral. Well,
the normal physical life, for the average person, we lock ourselves into the physical world and live our lives. This is the whole point of life. You could say the meaning of life is to live your life. And it is right that we do this. But some people have natural abilities where they can perceive the greater reality beyond the physical, and you find there are people out there who naturally see auras and spirit beings or see energy in various forms, and that's one aspect of looking beyond the normal reality into the greater reality. Astral projection is another. It happens to like everybody, I think, at one stage or other, or most people will have something, even if it's perceived as a dream. These are very, very common experiences. And the point of the books I write, most people, Whitley, you'd be maybe surprised to hear, do not want to do a lot of astral projection. I mean, it sounds like it is a very interesting thing to do, but most people have quite a bit of fear about stepping into the greater reality, and they are quite happy to do one or two astral projections, which can change your life. Because if you can induce an astral projection from the full waking state, you sit down, wide awake, you relax, project out of your body, and then you come back into your body again, you've just proven something to yourself, that you can exist separately from your physical body as a spirit, or something very much like a spirit. So that changes one's beliefs and opens you up a little bit more to the concept of and the reality of life after death. And it's not such a scary thing once you have some experience behind you in that respect.
It's not such a scary thing, and yet it is our nature to be frightened of it and to struggle against it. I struggled mightily against my wife's dying, and she made a conscious decision at one point to come back and not die because she wanted to be in this life. So we do resist this. Should we, or is this a mistake?
No, resist. I mean, the purpose of
resisting
life
death
here is to live life, and I mean, we fight against death, we rage against it, and so we should. I mean, nobody should seek death. I mean, everybody's life, even the lowliest person on this planet, I mean, every life is important. Even if you spend it sitting down in front of a television and never leave the lounge room and you sit there, you experience a life sitting down watching television. It's an important life, and everybody on this planet can have realizations, and all of a sudden, for example, a person may stand up, turn the television off, and go out and do something important for the world. We all work together.
And projecting yourself astrally and getting involved in this other level of reality is actually an extraordinarily life-affirming thing in my experience. Would you agree? I mean, I think so.
Would you repeat that, please?
It's a life-affirming thing to learn how to project into the astral. What do you think it does for you after death? You will be different in the astral after death than a person who's never really been conscious of this. How will you be different?
Well, I'll give you an example. My late mother, who passed away 2 years ago in her sleep, and interestingly enough, when she passed away in Australia, her sister in England passed away at exactly the same time, on the same night. They both let go together.
Good Lord.
And my mother came back and, at the same time, and they were very close together. And I'll tell you what happened. My mother came back to visit me a few weeks later, and in the astral. And I was sitting at my desk as usual, meditating. I do that for a couple of hours a day, and I have astral sight when I meditate. I'm fairly clairvoyant. And I saw a flash of red to the right of me, and I sort of looked over with my astral eyes, and I saw my mother there. And she looked like a very well-preserved 40, wearing her favourite colour, which is red. And everybody looks their best in the astral. Your self-image is has a powerful effect on how you appear. But anyway, I left my body and cannoned out. I really missed my mum, and I was looking forward to seeing her again. And I remember I cannoned out of my body and gave my mother a big hug, and I remember we passed through a couple of walls together while we were hugging, and it was quite noticeable. And then we came to rest in the back bedroom. And I remember how wonderful it was to hug her again, and I could smell that real mum smell, you know, the lipstick and hairspray and skin, and Mum's favourite perfume, yeah. And Mum was telling me, to answer your question here, that she used to have astral projections as well, and telling me about when she died. She had this experience which was just like an astral projection. She said, you know, the body buzzed a little bit and she just popped out of her body. And next minute she saw her sister Mary, who she adored. And they started talking and going off and exploring and doing things together. And she said, we were having so much fun with all these interesting beings. And a really long time went by and we looked at each other and we, you know, they spoke and said, do you think we've died? And Mary said to her, she said, what, you mean together at the same time? And Mum said, like, yeah. And they thought, wow, this is so excellent. Because they were wonderful. They were really happy. I mean, because they were both like 80 years old, and they were both still ambulatory but quite ill. And they hadn't experienced anything really nasty, like lots of pain, you know, hospital or things like that. And they were totally pleased to move out of life sideways together like this, and begin exploring the afterlife. Now, but because they had both of them had astral projections before, they were very familiar with the environment, and so we had no fear of them. They were really happy to have passed over. So
Robert
it had
Bruce,
a big effect on them.
We have come to the end of our time together, and very quickly it seems. A remarkable man, a man living in two worlds, quite genuine, quite real, has just told me what is one of the most wonderful and extraordinary stories I think I've heard in years. His mother and his aunt dying at the same time, and then he visits them in the astral, and we ask ourselves, what's the value in this? Do you want your life to be bigger? Well, I want your life to be bigger. That's why I'm bothering to go on the radio and yell and scream about the fact that you live in the middle of a great big extraordinary world, and people like Robert are good guides, real guides. So get his book, will you, Mastering Astral Projection. Go on his website, astraldynamics.com. As I say every week, get involved. You can build your spirit. You can do it. This is Whitley Strieber. This is Dreamland. Next up, we go into the world of scientific wonders with Linda Moulton Howe. One reporter who loves mysteries is radio's leading science journalist, Linda Moulton Howe. She's an Emmy Award-winning TV producer, documentary filmmaker, and writer, and the reporter and editor for EarthFiles.com, the Internet's most respected edge science website. Today she's got a report for us on that angel light, phenomenon, an invention, the rumors of which are sweeping the Internet. This is wild stuff. Here she is from Albuquerque, Linda Moulton Howe.
Thanks, Whitley. And yes, I do have an update from the inventor himself, but first, on this planet that seems to have weirder and weirder weather, I want to do an update that goes back to just the first week of this new year. It was one in which strong, wet, windy storms began moving across the west coast with an intensity that broke many weather records in California, Nevada, Utah, and other parts of the Northwest. More than 10 feet of snow piled in the Sierras, blown by 60-mile-an-hour winds in a short time. Nearly 200 people had to be rescued from deep snow in the San Bernardino Mountains near Los Angeles. Below the snow, more than a half-inch of rain was recorded every hour, and homeowners worked desperately with sandbags to keep waterlogged ground from sliding away. In the Los Angeles area, dozens of houses collapsed on water-soaked hillsides, including one mudslide in Ventura County that killed 10 people. Amtrak train passengers in Nevada were delayed for at least 8 hours, and planes were grounded at the Reno Tahoe International Airport. At the same time, in the Ohio River Valley of the central to eastern United States, heavy rains and snows caused flooding in West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. The wild weather from coast to coast knocked out power for more than 100,000 homes and killed at least a dozen people. The record rainfall that swept through Ventura County, California, destroyed at least $30 million worth of crops ranging from dates and carrots to strawberries, oranges, and avocados. California's Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger declared the county a disaster area, and that's only the first week of 2005. Where did all the moisture come from to produce so much nearly unprecedented rain and snowfall in such a short time? One physicist at the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies and the Center for Climate Systems Research at Columbia University says global warming computer models have long predicted a trend toward increased moisture and wind speeds on the west coast of the United States. Dr. Drew Shindell studies the big climate picture of the Earth from the stratosphere down to the low warm air that we live and move around in. This week I asked him if the intense January storms are a harbinger of the kind of weather that will occur more frequently as our planet continues to be warmed by increasing greenhouse gases.
Global warming makes a certain kind of weather more likely. And that's the kind of thing that we've been looking at for several years now in our climate model.
And your computer models for a long time have projected that with increasing temperature and global warming, that there would be increased wind speed and more water dropped on the west coast of the United States, correct?
That's right. So we have been projecting in our simulations that especially during the winter, you would really start to see a difference in both Western Europe and the western portion of North America, where you'd see more of this warm, wet, maritime air. And that does seem to be quite consistent with what we're seeing this year, of course.
And with even greater wind, potential wind damage, I know that Europe has been having a terrible time with winds and rain, and it's my understanding that on the west coast of the United States, in California and Nevada, that centuries records, the records are being broken going all the way back to when records began being kept.
Because in the summer you're starting from warmer temperatures, so if you have a heat wave, it becomes extremely severe. And the heat wave in Europe last summer was had been changed from something like a 1 in a 500 year odds to approaching 1 in 100 year odds. And projections are that will become a much more common occurrence, 1 in 10 odds or so, in another several decades. And that's the same kind of behavior you see then in the winter, with the odds really changing. So you may have very extreme winds in the past occasionally, but they might have happened once every century. And now the kind of really severe, wet, warm, and windy winter that happened much more infrequently in the past, simply the odds are that will begin to happen more and more often. So it's difficult to say what will happen in any particular year, but over, say, 2005 to 2015, the coming decade versus the last decade, I would expect largely warmer temperatures nationwide, not guaranteed to happen everywhere, but for the nation as a whole. And the West Coast will likely see warmer and wetter winters, as we've been discussing.
Just like this one from 2004 to 2005.
Yes, this may turn out to be more extreme than normal, but we'll see what happens. When we look up at the polar night jet, the wind stream that flows around 60 degrees north and up at the boundary between the troposphere and stratosphere, say 15 kilometers, when we look up at that, this year is exceptionally strong, and it's near record strength from the past 40 years or so. So I wouldn't expect that to be the norm for the next decade, but we may see this kind of very strong westerlies, very strong Pacific air being brought to the West Coast in warm, wet, windy year much more frequently. And you'll still get years with various highs and lows of temperature and precipitation, but the expectation is that it will get more humid in general at the middle latitudes, and we will probably have generally warmer temperatures throughout the year.
And more water, more rain.
Right, and greater rainfall and warmer temperatures and more humidity. So I wouldn't say that we'll necessarily have such mild temperatures in future summers. That seems unlikely to me. Though we may have many more mild winters, such as this year is turning out to be on the East Coast as well.
And that means probably more flooding problems on both the East and the West Coast.
There could potentially be more flooding problems, and there are also problems in the there are flooding problems in the potentially when all of the snow begins to melt out west.
Right.
In the very long run, if it gets too warm for the snow to keep falling and it falls more as rain, it's been happening more on the East Coast where the mountains aren't as high and often we're not. We're only within a few degrees of freezing point, so a couple of degrees warmer means we get rain instead of snow. Then it's actually a water supply issue, and that come spring there's not a lot of snow around to melt and fill up the reservoirs.
Right.
So there are a lot of water issues that I think planners would do well to start considering how to deal with.
Wherever global warming takes the Earth's climate and weather, there are many satellites now orbiting the planet which help monitor air and water temperatures, glacial melts, hurricanes, and dozens of other details in this complex world. Some of the many satellites that orbit Earth also do work for military and defense agencies. Protecting those satellites is vital to national security. But this week, a story from North Bay, Ontario, Canada, says an inventor there has come up with a machine that not only can see through walls, it can stop the electronics in any machine, including high-altitude orbiting satellites and nuclear missiles. And now, apparently, the Pentagon, Saudi Arabia, and France are taking notice. The inventor calls his wall-penetrating device Angel Light, and you can see photographs of it at my website, www.earthfiles.com. Just go to the top of the headlines page, and you'll find a hot link to this report about Angel Light. The Canadian inventor's name is Troy Herchebes. He is 41 years old and lives with his wife and family in North Bay, Ontario. Troy has no college degrees, but did study environmental issues for 3 years at the Sir Sandford Fleming College in Lindsay, Ontario. Once he was attacked by a grizzly bear and survived. That gave him a lifelong interest in studying bears, and he invented what he calls a bear suit. The idea is that for a consulting fee from companies that make bear repellent sprays, Troy Herchebes will put on his big bear suit and try out new red pepper sprays to see if the sprays will fend off black bears and grizzlies. Here now is Troy Herchebes to explain more about his bear suit research and how he came to build the Angel Light device.
Think of RoboCop, and then you've basically got the suit that I wear. It's specifically designed for my body. I'm a bear behavioral specialist. I wear the suits. I conduct the research. Winter den research, trying to find the trigger hormone that NASA's been searching for 20 years, is the best defense and offense against the grizzly bear, aggression techniques, deterrent sprays, changing radio collars under winter conditions, stuff like that.
And who would hire you?
The people that would hire me are the companies that make the bear sprays around the world that market them to the public. It's $1 billion business, bear sprays. Grizzly bears, you don't have a suit on, you're pretty well dead. It's not a big reach. As I say to many people in lectures, think of a great white shark. A biologist will not study a great white shark unless he's in a cage. No cage, you're dead. Same thing with a grizzly bear. My suit is basically a mobile cage.
And you would be hired to put on your cage suit to protect you from a black bear and a grizzly bear in order to test these red pepper sprays.
Right.
Troy says that the ideas for building his bear suits, like the ideas for at least 9 other inventions of his over the past 17 years, have come to him in vivid, repetitive dreams.
repetitious dreams, which are very rare, I hear from the scientific community. Ever since I was 16, I would see the innovation in the dream, and when it would come back again and again and again, I would have basically a blueprint in my mind. I've always built my suits, which is marveled the engineer community due to the fact that I don't use schematics, I don't use blueprints, I don't use drawings. Straight out of my head, I build it by hand, and it comes out completely engineered proportionate. They just can't understand how you do it. With all my innovations, the big ones, fire paste that MIT has said is 20 years ahead of what NASA's using. That comes out of a dream. The limbic system, which is just recent. That's not more than 2 months old. That is for the soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan that are getting killed needlessly because of their light-skinned Hummers. These are blast cushions that stop RPGs. Again, a dream. Angel light, a dream. I see it, and I just create it, and it's never failed. It always works. I don't know why, but that's, Einstein once said, the imagination and the mind. He went to bed all the time with a pen and a notepad beside him, and many times he'd come out of a dream, and right there, he would write it down. And a lot of his theories and that came from dreams. That's a fact.
Okay. For a general radio audience, could you please go back to the first in series of dreams that you had about angel light and explain why you have called it angel light?
Well, the first dream started about a year and a half ago. I don't pay much attention to the first dreams because it's just a dream. But when it's repeated in a basically the exact same sequence, which is extremely rare, you could talk to 1 million people. You might find 5 that actually have a repetitive dream. So science says it's very, very rare. Mm-hmm. And then the dream happens again, and you're basically in the dream building it from scratch. You have to look at angel light in its entirety. This is 14 feet long and weighs 1/4 of a ton. There's probably, 8 to 900 different sections to it. It's quite elaborate. All this is pieced out into the dream. And then the actual use of it is basically portrayed in the dream. This time, of course, with angel light, it was to see through walls in real time space. It's all the other things that it's doing that's basically grabbing the attention. And why I called it angel light is I'm a great believer in Christ and angels, and people would look at me as they have the last couple of days and say, why would you call something like that with this terrible hide effect that could kill people? Angel light, angels. I said, well, yeah, why don't you understand angels? God, the way I look at God is his left hand is Gabriel and his right hand is Michael. And when he's in a good mood and he wants to send a message to somebody, he sends Gabriel down, which is nice and sweet. When he's in a pissed off mood, he sends Michael down. And look out when Michael starts to come down, because he's, that's basically the archangel of war. So there's always 2 sides to God. There's 2 sides to an angel. So that's what you have. Angel light, yes, can see through walls in real-time space. And
could you describe that first moment when you turned angel light on and what happened in front of you?
As soon as I turned it on, it's like out of Star Trek. I always said George Lucas couldn't imagine this. The wall opened up. My God, it was terrifying. It wasn't eureka. It was like, holy jeez. Well, I got so excited that I put my hand in front of it, figuring, holy jeez, I wonder if you can see inside your hand. You're talking blood cells. It was so spooky looking inside my hand that if I wouldn't have pulled it back, I'd probably be dead today. Because when I did pull it back, it had only hit the light for 3 seconds. Was there a burning feeling? No. Was there any swelling? No. But an hour later, I lost the use of that hand for a year. And I've only got maybe, 60% of it back. I can't even wear my wedding ring.
Well, what exactly happened to the wall? Did you see light? Did it just disappear? What happened?
No, what happens is I've got a wall in front of me. It's about 1.5 feet, 2 feet thick of solid concrete. On the other side of it is the garage. Now, I know what thermal technology is. I know what radar is. I know what all the technology they have in the world. If you put whatever technology you want in front of that wall right now that the military has, you're not going to see the garage in real-time space. People say, well, what is that? Well, this is what it is. Get a jackhammer, cut a massive hole in the wall, and then stick your front window on it. That's real-time space. What you see in the garage, if you stepped in it, is exactly what you're seeing through the wall. And I almost broke my hand twice, because what happens is, when you turn angel light on, a hole, the aperture, whatever size you're using, opens up in the wall. And it tricks you into believing that you can put your hand through the wall. Of course, you can't. There's still cement there. You'll break your hand.
And so it is as if a window then suddenly appears in the cement wall?
Exactly. It just opens up. And it looks like there's nothing there. It's like somebody took a whole chunk out of the wall, and all you can see now is what's inside the garage. The car, the license plate, the lawnmower, this and that, just as clear as it can be. You can see the reds, the whites, the blues. You can read a fine print on newspapers that are lying around. It's just like you're walking to the garage. The problem is if you try to walk through the wall, you'll basically break your face.
And neither you nor any scientist you've discussed this with understands how this is working.
I don't understand it, but one scientist said, like with the doors you've opened up, it's like another universe. You're talking, to me, it just sees through a wall. It's beautiful. Isn't that lovely? Who cares? I got more excited for my father, who's an anthropologist, and looked and said, oh, my God, son, can you imagine the implications for the anthropological world, for ruins and sites that have never been found but only dreamt of? I said, yeah, stick it on a chopper and do a low fly over top of an area that you think there's ruins underneath there. I mean, wow, the ground would open up. I mean, it would be like looking hundreds of feet under the ground with nothing there. You would think if you jumped out of the chopper, you would fall through the hole, but there is no hole there. You just think there's a hole there. I've done it in my front yard, right out in front of the neighbors. I've done it right in the front yard. I had a buddy with me, my brother. He says, there's pipes underneath the ground here, Troy, like sewage and gas pipes and stuff like that, all the mains and that, because it's saying so right there. Can we see them? I said, I don't know. Let's turn it on. Boom. My brother actually thought he went to step into it. He went to step in to the hole that wasn't there. It just appears to be a hole there. You can see, and you can see all the pipes, everything. The whole infrastructure of the street opened up. There it was, bang, just like that. But if you step on it, you're stepping on the ground. So I have no idea.
Since you have these ideas and repetitive dreams, do you have any intuitive sense about what it is exactly that is inspiring you to come up with these inventions?
I don't know. I really don't. My mother's a very devout Catholic Christian. Like she said, you got, legions of angels around you. Maybe it's, destiny and all this kind of stuff like that. I really don't have a clue. The French do not care that it can see through walls. They're grabbing angel light. And the only reason why the Pentagon is stepping up to the plate now and everybody else is because angel light can take out anything in the world that runs on electronics. That means if I point it towards space, that's what I'm building right now. That's what France gave me the money for. I'm building a booster to take satellites out of space if they so desire to do so. An F-18 fighter that's cloaked with stealth technology, it can pick it up. But more than that, intercontinental ballistic missiles, tanks, planes, anything that runs on electronics, which is 90% of all the militaries in the world right now, are totally rendered useless with angel light. So it's got nothing to do with looking through walls. That's not what's grabbing the attention. What's grabbing the attention is it is now a national defense problem. It's like a country, a small country who is a nobody. If they have angel light, now becomes the big boy in the block. That's why I'm getting all the attention. That's the travesty of it.
And what you are implying then is that whatever angel light does, it's interfering with the electromagnetic frequencies of some operating machines?
Well, it must be doing something, because when the French came in, they brought in a box about a square foot in diameter, and it had a glass filament, like a mirrored filament on the outside. And I said, what's that? And they said, it's just a curiosity. They said, after they had seen angel light turned on and it saw through the wall, was that impressive to them? That was not impressive compared to what it did to the box, because apparently what was inside the box was electronics, which could not be touched by anything. In other words, there's no way you're going to knock these electronics out. They put the box in front of it, and it was gone in seconds. And I told them, well, guys, I don't like anything else you've ever imagined. Light, lasers, anything bounces off mirrors. You put a mirror in front of angel light, I'll walk right through it. So it doesn't matter what's inside that box or what you've got protection, the light will go right through it. I've already talked to MIT. They told me to try every known metal you can think of. I have tried pure tin, I have tried steel, titanium, ceramic, all the way up to lead, and angel light goes through it all.
So far, apparently, the scientists are asking him to come to their labs to assemble it, and he says that he has lived only on the money he's made from doing the bear suit work. All of these inventions that have come to him in his dreams, he's done on his own time and money, and that he is really basically, he says, doesn't have much money, and that he is himself baffled by another aspect of this angel light, that not only does it open up the walls or whatever's around it, and you can see beyond, apparently as if it was clear air, and it can stop anything electronically. That experience that he had when he went to put his hand in front of the light to reach through what he thought was like a window in his garage, that left his hand so numb that he couldn't use it for a long period of time. He decided to see what would happen if he put some animals like a rat in an aquarium, a glass aquarium, and put the angel light beam on the rats, and they died very quickly, and it scared him. And according to him, he dismantled most of the equipment because he was afraid of it. He's talked, he said, with scientists about this, the fact that what could he do to make it not lethal and still be useful. Well, the paradox in this story is that whatever is operating, if it is functioning the way he has described and what apparently a couple of people have witnessed with him, it has a very interesting ability to be used as a defense weapon, while at the same time introducing questions about how does it see through matter and see details so clearly. But the horrible downside would be that it would be also very lethal to biological systems, and that is the thing that bothers him the most. And he says he's had so many inquiries since this article hit the Bay News by Phil Novak, a reporter, that he's decided that he's going to try to put the equipment back together into the level in which it can function, looking through a wall. And on February 17th, about a month from now, that he will give a demonstration for the press and media in Canada or anybody who wants to go to his lab, as long as they will sign waivers that have been drawn up by a lawyer saying that anybody who enters his lab when he turns on the angel light device must free him from any liability if they get sick or even die. And he is saying it that seriously. And where this story is going to go, Whitley, I have no idea.
Well, Linda, you know, my initial reaction to this story, and I'm afraid I have influenced the folks that work on my website's news maybe adversely, was that it had to be a hoax, because I saw the bear suit deal and the ignoble award he's been given for the bear suits, and I just thought to myself, gosh, this guy must not be on the up and up, but frankly, this interview makes me think maybe he is. And if that's the case, it's truly amazing. Something new has indeed been invented, and I would guess that I know something about French technology. I've had a few experiences with the French, and they are very effective and open-minded when it comes to the new, and I'm not too surprised to see them being involved in this while the Pentagon drags its heels. I think that it's likely the Pentagon will continue to drag its heels and drag him right into the mud if the guy turns out not to be a hoax.
Well, we'll have to see what happens in mid-February, and I asked him, I said, can I call and talk with you after you've done this demonstration, just to do an update? And he said yes. So when we get to mid-February, if there is something more to report on Dreamland and EarthFiles.com, I will bring it.
Thanks very much for a great report, Linda Moulton. In a long time, and I've had a few things happen to me in my life that were bizarre. Specifically, it involved something that kept coming up my leg physically, and which I eventually captured one night as it was boring into my skin above my collarbone, pulled it out of myself, and could see it between my fingers. But when I opened my fingers after crushing it, it just disappeared before my eyes. And you recommended, as I recall, that I plunge it into a dish of salt on the bedside. And that helped. It made it smaller. But it didn't go away for a long, long time, Robert. And before we go on, I want to say two things about Robert Bruce. First, he's the real deal, in my opinion. And second, he is a master of something. What that is, I don't know. Robert, maybe you can enlighten us. What happened to me, do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I think is happening was happening to you, and we've talked about this at some length. Some of the experiences you are having with the little entity thing crawling up your leg, I've had that myself in the past as well. And
few astral experiences, I guess. I woke up one night. This was after I'd spent quite a bit of time, weeks in fact, with this group of people who would meditate with me in the night, and they would come and you'd hear them, 7 of them, landing on the roof just after I started meditating, right above the room that I would meditate in, and they were coming every night, and one of them would come down into the house sometimes, and in fact spent some time actually living in the house. And one night, when we first met, when they first showed up, a couple of nights after the first time I encountered them, one of them, they began to want to see a review of my life. And they came across something in my life that could, I think, justifiably have been called a sin. I mean, I'm not a saint. I've done things that are wrong. And they were really rather nonplussed by this. Later that night, I woke up, and the roof seemed to be gone, and all 7 of them were glaring down at me from above, and behind them the sky was absolutely black and featureless without a single star in it. It was an awful darkness. Awful. And then, the next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes again.
Occasionally exorcisms, and I tend to come across negative entities quite frequently, and occasionally you will pick them up in your travels.
Now,
and,
of course, by travels, Robert Bruce is not talking about travels on any airplanes. Am I right about that?
Well, a bit of both. I do quite a lot of astral projection, as well as the workshops I've been doing around the world lately, the last 2 years. But you can pick these things up in the astral occasionally, although it's more likely you would pick them up in the physical body when you are, helping people with these sorts of problems.
Now, why?
But I've become quite adept at cleansing myself.
What are they, Robert? I mean, is the astral plane ridden with bugs and little unpleasant little creatures crawling around?
To an extent, yeah. The best way you can explain this is, as above, so below. The astral dimension is a massive dimensional area closely linked to the physical, and for everything there is in the physical world, including bugs, snakes, spiders, lions, tigers, you name it, there is something like that in the astral.
Well, I woke up one night. It's true,
I think this is happening to your astral body. And what you're looking at here is like an astral creature of some kind. It doesn't physically exist, but it is in the astral. And you seem to have the tendency to wake up in your astral body. And often you do not know you are awake in your astral body. It appears to be your physical body. So in that particular state where you are awake in your astral body and you have like an astral creature interfering with you, it appears for all the world like it is a physical event happening. And the idea of plunging it into salt is a crystalline, absorbent crystal form. And if you plunge an astral creature into salt, it will absorb the energy out of it and demanifest it. And you may have to do that repeated times, but it will have an effect.
Go ahead.
This is just one of the countermeasures you can use for that sort of thing. And since we spoke last, I've been working on more countermeasures and trying to find more effective ways of solving these sorts of problems, which are really difficult to come to grips with.
Now, do you still have this sort of thing happening to you?
Occasionally, they come and go. Given the sort of work I do a lot of healing.
First, Robert Bruce, then Linda interviews the angel light inventor. That's right, the guy who's claiming he's invented something that can see through walls. The French government allegedly has paid him a lot of money for it. A lot of scientists are fascinating, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Is it a hoax or is it for real? Well, he says he invented it because of a dream. Listen to him tell his story and make up your own mind. I am proud, but frankly a little frightened, to introduce Robert Bruce, his new book, a masterpiece, Mastering Astral Projection, Successful Astral Projection in 90 Days. Well, we're going to get into that in a few minutes, but before we do that, we're going to talk a little bit about the last couple of times Robert was on this radio program. All hell broke loose in my life. We talked about his book about psychic self-defense. That book, Robert, what was that called? Mastering Psychic Self-Defense? I forget the title of it.
Practical Psychic Self-Defense.
That's right, Practical Psychic Self-Defense. And it was a perfectly fascinating program, and it was very popular with listeners. But afterwards, I proceeded to experience a psychic attack of no small proportions. In fact, it was the most bizarre thing I can remember having happen to me